some stories just grab you, you know? They're not just about dates and events, but about how a single family can become so woven into the life of a city.
Absolutely.
Today, we're really diving deep into one of those stories, the saga of the Neuman family of Arad. We've got this incredible record put together by Pushkal Peter, translated by Gabriel Roman, and it's quite the journey.
It really is. And what makes the Newmans so fascinating isn't just how long they were influential and arid, but the sheer breadth of their impact. We're talking mid-19th century onwards.
Yeah, touching almost everything.
Economics, social life, culture, even sports later on.
Exactly. So our goal here, our mission for this deep dive, is to really get under the skin of this family's legacy. We want to understand not just what they built, but maybe what drove them, how they managed to shape Arad so profoundly over generations.
Right. And the source calls them a legendary family of industrialists, which already sets a high bar.
It does. So where does this legend begin? They weren't always in Arad, were they?
No, that's a key point. The source traces their origins back to Bazinka, near Kushi in modern-day Slovakia. They started out, it seems, as itinerant Jewish traders, dealing in feathers, things like that.
Pretty humble beginnings.
Very. And they arrive in Arad sometime in the second half of the 1840s. There were originally 5 sons, but 2, Moore and Jacob, sadly died young.
Leaving Eid, Alfred, and Daniel.
Right. And they arrive in Arad at a really turbulent time.
Yeah, the aftermath of the 1848-49 revolution, that hung heavy over the city, didn't it?
Definitely. You had the surrender of the Hungarian army nearby at Iria Valagos, the execution of the 13 generals right there in Arad. I mean, it created this atmosphere of, fear and suspicion.
Yeah, informers everywhere, apparently. And people were watched closely, especially anyone with revolutionary sympathies like that newspaper editor, Jake Leo.
So for the Neumann brothers just continuing their itinerant trading, moving around, it was just too risky in that climate.
Makes sense. So this challenge actually pushed them in a new direction.
Exactly. In 1851, they make a pretty bold move. They set up a small distillery. Not right in the city center, but on the outskirts, on the road towards Pasica.
A calculated risk, maybe?
Perhaps.
Okay.
And it started small, but wow, it took off faster than they probably ever imagined.
It's amazing how quickly it grew, from a small operation to a full-blown factory in just a few years. What fueled that, do you think?
Well, it seems the demand for spirits was just huge. Their initial output, maybe 10, 15 hectoliters a day, couldn't keep up.
So they were clearly onto something.
Oh, definitely. By 1862, they'd already expanded, adding a steam mill. They were meeting a real market need.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There was a fire, wasn't there, in 1867?
Yes, a major setback. The distillery was destroyed. But here's where you really see their character, their resilience.
What did they do?
They didn't just pack it in. They reinvested the capital they'd built up and rebuilt. But not just rebuilt, they went bigger, more modern.
Wow, turning disaster into opportunity.
And the timing was, almost perfect, politically speaking. The Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867 created this period of economic boom, especially in Hungary.
Ah, so they could capitalize on that.
Precisely. They were positioned perfectly to offer better quality spirits, likely cheaper too, just as the economy was taking off.
Smart, strategic, not just luck.
Absolutely. And that strategy paid off.
Mm.
This Arad company eventually becomes the largest in its sector in Hungary, and later, believe it or not, the entire Austro-Hungarian Empire.
That's just astonishing growth. From itinerant traders to empire-wide leaders.
It really is. And they face more adversity too. Another big fire in 1882.
Again, wow.
Yeah. But again, that same determination. They repaired the damage relatively quickly, within a couple of years, and by this point their reputation was solid. They were exporting winning awards at international fairs.
So by the end of the 19th century, what did the operation look like?
It was huge. A high-capacity spirit factory. The steam mill grinding something like 90,000 bushels of wheat annually. And they'd even merged with a nearby yeast factory, a real industrial complex.
An empire built on spirits and grain. But the source suggests it wasn't just about the business, right? There were strong family values involved.
Very much so. A deep respect for work, obviously, but also for learning, for education. You see it in the second generation.
Like Alfred studying commerce in Zurich in Germany.
Exactly. And Daniel's path is particularly interesting. He started very practically, as a locksmith apprentice.
Hands-on experience.
Right. Then he goes on to get an engineering degree from the Technical University in Karlsruhe, a top institution. Then more training in Vienna, Budapest.
He didn't stop there, did he? Didn't he go to the U.S.?
He did a study trip to America, specifically looking at, and this is fascinating, the human factor behind development.
Wow, that sounds very modern. Thinking about the people, not just the
Huh.
machines.
Way ahead of his time, arguably. And while he's doing this, his brother Adolf, also second generation, is managing a branch they had set up in Vienna, expanding their reach.
It feels very deliberate, very planned. The source mentions collective wisdom in their decisions.
Yeah, it suggests it wasn't just one person calling all the shots. It was a family effort, thinking long term. And eventually, this success, this scale, it attracts attention from the very top.
You mean the emperor's visit? Franz Joseph in 1884? That must have been a massive event for them.
Oh, absolutely huge. He toured the factories, and apparently he was genuinely impressed.
What impressed him?
The integration.
Mm.
How they used the byproducts from the distillery and the mill to feed these large pig and cattle farms they ran. Very efficient, very little waste. Almost like a circular economy concept way back then.
Incredible. And that visit might have directly led to them getting a noble title.
It seems highly likely. The rank Vegvari was granted to the whole family. And getting a title from Franz Joseph, well, he wasn't known for just handing those out. It was a significant recognition.
Though the timing was a bit staggered, wasn't it? The visit was 84, but the title came later.
Yeah, the actual Vegvari rank, then the imperial prefix wasn't added until 1903, and the full baron status only came another decade later, in 1913. Daniel did get the title imperial counselor earlier, though.
So recognition built over time.
Exactly. There was even a marble plaque commemorating the emperor's visit, though apparently it was removed after 1920, along with a bust of Neuman, signs of changing times later on.
Still, it's interesting that the source highlights their focus was really on the work itself, on producing added value, not just chasing titles.
Right. The titles were a recognition of what they'd already built, rather than the sole objective. And they kept building. Their products were reaching markets all across Europe, even in North Africa and the East by then.
So the factory, at the turn of the 20th century, what was it like?
A major hub. It had its own factory railway, electric lighting, which was still quite novel and employed nearly 1,000 people, run by Daniel Samuels Adolf, who'd come back from Vienna, and the younger Alfred.
A powerhouse. But their impact wasn't just economic, was it? They became major philanthropists in Arad.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Their contribution to the city went way beyond just jobs and taxes, though the taxes themselves must have been substantial.
What kind of philanthropy are we talking about?
Well, back in 1885, they set up a foundation for poor school children with a pretty hefty starting sum. Then Adolf started another one in 1890 for orphans in memory of his wife.
So a long-standing commitment.
Yes. And it continued with the next generation. Carolee, Daniel's son, joined the business after studying law and touring Europe. He took over managing the mills.
And then there was the school?
Yes, that's a big one. In 1892, the brothers built a school and a kindergarten in the Guy district for their employees' kids, but also for other local children. And apparently that school still exists today, named after the primary school number 10.
That's quite a legacy. Did they support education in other ways?
They did. Directly helping promising kids from poor backgrounds, sometimes even funding their university studies. The source says they saw this community involvement as an honor, not just, ticking a box.
And it wasn't just the men, right? Daniel's wife was involved too.
Yes, Maria. She founded a women's charitable society and a social canteen, providing meals for those in need.
And Daniel himself organized some quite creative fundraising efforts.
He did. That Selimina Pkenia, the spiritual people's kitchen idea, was brilliant. A publication with contributions from famous writers and artists, Yochai Moore, Mark Twain, Gustav Mahler even, all to raise money for charity.
That's incredible reach, Mark Twain.
I know. And Daniel also supported the Arad Philharmonic Society. The younger Adolf was involved in charity too, supported the local photo club, and was even vice chairman of the Workers' Party for a time.
A broad range of interests.
Definitely. And they put significant money into building the Cultural Palace, which opened in 1913, a major landmark.
And speaking of landmarks, they built some impressive buildings for themselves too, like the Neuman House and Palace.
Yes, those imposing palaces in the city center.
Yeah.
Still visible markers of their presence and wealth.
So all this activity, economic, social, cultural, it culminates in that formal recognition, the title of Baron in 1913.
Right. The official certificate, signed by the Emperor and Prime Minister Titsa István, specifically mentions both their economic and their charitable work. It's also noted that maybe the N was dropped from their name when they got the de Vegvar prefix.
Interesting detail. And did getting the title slow down their philanthropy?
Not at all. The source lists more donations after that. Continued support for the Guy Kindergarten, money for a pension institute for Hungarian journalists, Several foundations for the poor set up after Eden Sr.
I
died.
just kept giving back.
Support for building a Jewish boys' school in 1904, a huge donation in 1912 for the infectious diseases ward at the Children's Hospital, and something really progressive, establishing a pension fund for their own employees and civil servants in 1912, one of the first in Hungary.
A pension fund in 1912. That's remarkable foresight.
Truly extraordinary. This deep, ongoing commitment really defines them. Now, as we move further into the 20th century, the next generation, particularly Carolee, Daniel's son, really steps up.
And Carolee had his own big industrial vision, didn't he? Something different.
Yes, he spearheaded a completely new venture, the Hungarian textile and cotton mill. It started up around 1909, spinning, weaving, finishing, the works.
High tech for the time.
Absolutely. They imported top-of-the-line machinery from Norton in England. And under Carolee's leadership, it became a massive success, really high-quality stuff. It even did well during World War I, which is saying something.
Shows that adaptability again.
Exactly. And they showed that same adaptability after World War I with the whole political map changing, Romania expanding.
How did they handle that transition?
They adjusted quickly, looked for new markets within the expanded Romania across the Carpathians. But they also remained loyal, to their local heritage and showed loyalty to the new Romanian state. Practical. They even moved their Vienna office to Bucharest.
Balancing act.
A tricky one. And they continued to support the Hungarian community in Arad, like giving significant funds to the Catholic gymnasium. Meanwhile, the factories in Arad just kept humming along, employing thousands, really setting the standard.
And they restructured into joint stock companies.
Yes, Integra for the spirit and yeast factory and the mill, and ITA Industria Textila Aradiana for the Buning textile factory, modernizing their structure.
But then darker clouds gather over Europe, fascism rises. How did that impact the family?
He hit them hard. Carolee, who was the elder statesman by then, saw the writing on the wall and emigrated to the United States. His brother, Alfred Jr., had already passed away.
So who was left to manage things?
The responsibility fell mainly on Ede, Ferenc, and their sister Maria. Ede took over the spirit factory, Ferenc the textile mill. Maria was often abroad, focused more on art and photography.
But Ede didn't stay long either.
No. As anti-Jewish laws intensified, Ede also emigrated, first to England, then the U.S., which left the immense burden of running both major factories on the shoulders of young Ferenc. He was only born in 1911.
That's a huge responsibility for someone so young. Was he prepared?
It seems Carolee had seen his potential. He'd made sure Frank got top-notch training in textiles in England at Manchester Technical University, and then practical experience back in the Arad factories.
So he knew the business.
Inside out. And Baron Feri, or Baron Feri, as people called him, really brought a modern approach. He adopted English industrial practices, brought in technical experts from Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia. He basically revolutionized the Romanian textile industry.
And the ITA factory thrived under him.
Dominated the Romanian market. Exported too. They paid good wages, had this tradition of families working there for generations. People were loyal. And Baron Feri himself became this, larger-than-life figure in Arad society. Feri, known for his charm, maybe a bit of a reputation with the ladies, had a wide circle of friends. Though the source hints some might have been, fair-weather friends.
But he continued the family's social commitments.
Oh, yes. He carried on the UTA colony project for the workers. Those villa-style houses, subsidized utilities. It was unprecedented in Romania. Really took care of his people.
And the kindergartens.
He built kindergartens near both factories, another first for Romania. And his work ethic was apparently legendary. First one in, last one out. Even had an apartment right there at the factory complex.
Lived and breathed the business.
Totally. And during the really difficult war years, under the Antonescu regime with all the discriminatory laws, he managed things, often behind the scenes, navigating incredibly dangerous waters to keep the factories afloat and protect people.
And he did more than just protect the factories, didn't he? The source mentions something extraordinary regarding deportations.
Yes, this is truly remarkable. He played a crucial role, financially, in preventing the deportation of Jews from southern Transylvania and Banat. Along with Max Auschnitt, they apparently offered something like 50 million Swiss francs. There's even an SS colonel's report mentioning this, an act of incredible courage and humanity.
That's astounding. Risking everything.
And his connections during the war, particularly with American General Schuyler, there's speculation this might have protected the factories. Perhaps the Americans saw strategic value in the textile mill.
Plausible. And it might explain why the UTA colony and the mill weren't hit during the 1944 bombings.
It's a strong possibility suggested by the source. But the end of the war didn't mean smooth sailing.
No, the post-war period brought new challenges.
Big ones. Getting production back up and running was tough. Political instability, economic chaos, and Baron Feri seemed to pour more of his energy into his other passion, sports.
The football team. AMIFA.
Yeah, he invested heavily in it. But then the political winds shifted dramatically again. The communists were consolidating power.
And they pushed him out.
He was excluded from the steering committee of the sports club he'd basically bankrolled. So what does he do? He starts his own club in 1945, the ITA Sports Club. Industria Textila Aradiana.
Wow. He didn't give up easily.
Not at all. He built it into a multi-section club, but the football team was the crown jewel. He brought in top players, a famous Hungarian coach, Opata Zoltan.
And it built a stadium.
The most modern stadium in the provinces at the time, built in 1946. He even had the turf flown in from London.
Flown in from London, that's dedication.
Right. And the team was good. They won championships, the Romanian Cup. He even gave players bicycles as rewards. It was a real golden era for Arad football, fueled by him.
But that couldn't last given the political climate.
Sadly, no. In June 1948, the hammer fell. The ITA textile factory in Degrara, everything was nationalized by the state.
Just taken away.
Overnight. The owners, the Neumans, were literally barred from entering the premises they had built.
Did Francis Neuman see it coming?
The source suggests he might have anticipated it, but perhaps hoped his workers' loyalty would somehow protect him or the factories. But it was hopeless against the state apparatus.
So what happened to him?
He fled. On July 31st, 1948, he left Arad for good. And how he escaped was a mystery for a long, long time.
How did he get out?
The truth eventually came out, and it's quite something. He was helped by 11 women from Pasica, the nearby town, who smuggled him across the border by bicycle.
By bicycle. Amazing.
Incredible story. He made it to Budapest, then Salzburg in Austria. That's where he married Kondo Catalin, or Kitty, in 1952. And from there, they emigrated to the United States.
And his life in the U.S., was he involved with Arad anymore?
It seems complicated. The source paints a picture of disappointment, maybe bitterness. He apparently severed most ties with Arad, even changed his name legally to Francis de Vegvari.
So no contact with the football team he built?
For a long time, people thought that. But it turns out he was actually involved in promoting European football, soccer in the U.S., and became a big supporter of Bayern Munich. So the passion for the sport was still there.
Ah, interesting twist.
And he did keep in touch with some people who'd emigrated from Arad, like helping out the former player Bonihati. His uncle Carolee was still alive when he arrived in the U.S., passed away in the 50s. Carolee's son Charles apparently had no interest in trying to reclaim anything back in Romania, and his brother Ede also settled in the U.S., in Boston.
So the family was dispersed?
Yes. And late in life, Baron Feri apparently expressed some interest in getting the family home back in Arad, but not the factories. He died in Naples, Florida in 1997.
And that was the end of the Neuman connection to Arad?
Almost. His son, Andrew, born in the U.S., did eventually pursue restitution for 2 properties, and he made an interesting offer. He'd donate the UTA stadium back to the city if the claims were settled quickly.
Which was good timing, given ownership disputes around the stadium then.
Very opportune. Andrew visited Arad a few times, but the source suggests he didn't know a huge amount about the details of his father's life, or the family's deep history there. Apparently didn't even know about the family converting to Catholicism generations earlier. He made the stadium donation in 2005. It's now the Francis Neuman Stadium.
A fitting tribute.
Yes, but the other restituted properties were sold off. And that really marked the final chapter of the family's direct, active involvement in the city they shaped so much. Their graves are still there, though, in the Jewish cemetery.
So what remains today, besides the stadium name?
Well, there's a street named after them. The Textile High School carries the legacy in its name. And that primary school number 10 in Guy, tangible reminders.
But what about the industrial empire they built? What happened to the factories after nationalization?
Well, predictions were they'd collapse without the Neumans. Initially, under socialism, they actually did okay for a while.
But eventually?
Eventually, the problems inherent in the planned economy, lack of investment, lack of modernization, it took its toll. The decline set in.
And after the 1989 revolution?
Tragically, during the chaotic privatizations of the 1990s, the factories were essentially destroyed. Sold off for scrap metal, the land redeveloped, even historic pieces like the original 1851 steam engine, were lost.
Gone. The physical legacy wiped out.
The site of that once pioneering textile factory, it's a new residential neighborhood now.
Wow. It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? The enduring memory and impact of the family versus the physical destruction of what they created.
It really is. So when you pull back and look at the whole Neuman story, what do you see? You see this family rise from, well, almost nothing to become absolute pillars of Arad.
Yeah.
Their impact was just immense: economic, social, cultural, sporting.
Generations of building and contributing.
Exactly. And incredible resilience through massive changes, revolutions, wars, economic shifts, political upheavals, and always that deep commitment to Arad, to its people.
Yeah, for me, the takeaways are just their incredible journey from traders to industrialists on that scale. That constant blend of sharp business sense with genuine social responsibility.
Right? They weren't mutually exclusive for them.
Not at all. And Baron Feri's hidden role during the war, that immense bravery, plus the sheer drama of his escape and later life. Stranger than fiction, some of it.
It really makes you think, doesn't it,
Yeah.
about the kind of long-term ripple effect one family can have on a place, but also how vulnerable those legacies are to the huge tides of history, politics, and economics.
Powerful thoughts. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the incredible complex story of the Neuman family. We really hope it's given you, our listeners, a sense of their profound and lasting echo in Arad, and maybe spark some thoughts about how such legacies are made and sometimes unmade.